All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the 6 steps to successful strategic planning. My name is Maggie Brennan. I am a managing consultant at Fund Consulting, and I'll be serving as the moderator for this session, joined by my wonderful panelists who will introduce themselves momentarily. But before we get started, wanted to share some quick housekeeping. First, we're recording this webinar. So, also on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a few icons for the chat and Q&A features. So we really encourage everyone to take advantage of that. Chat feature, comment, introduce yourselves, interact with each other really throughout the session. Also, please submit any questions that you have as we're going using that Q&A box throughout the program as they occur to you. We'll address audience questions immediately following this session in an interactive Zoom room. So submit those questions, and then when we, get to that point where we're going into that Zoom discussion room, each participant will be able to use their video and audio to interact with the panelists and other attendees. So look forward to that. Also, a slide, please. All right. Perfect. So before we get started talking about strategic planning, I wanted to share with y'all that as a part of OFN's Next Generation CDFI Workforce Initiative, OFN's developing a tailored professional development resources and opportunities for CDFI practitioners. This is going to include things like in-person trainings, virtual trainings, as well as a career center. OFN will also be producing a wide variety, over 30 toolkits over the next couple of years to share leading practices on a variety of topics. So you might have already seen the first toolkit, CDFI 101. It was released last month and can be accessed via the event homepage or the link in the chat. In the coming months, OFN will be releasing a series of new toolkits, including one on the topic of today's session, strategic and annual operational planning. So to give you a little bit of preview for this toolkit, it's slated for release in Q2 of this year. So I don't want to sound like the CDFI fund, but like coming up, giving y'all a vague date. But it's coming out soon. It's going to share leading practices, information, and tools to help you develop the most effective strategic planning process for your organization. The toolkit's going to feature things like definitions and core concepts of strategic and annual operational planning. What are the different types of strategic plans? Some advice for like things to keep in mind as you're going through strategic planning. What should your budget be if you're going to hire someone to help you with strategic planning? What's a typical timeline? How frequently should you go through strategic planning? Who needs to be involved and when? So lots of things to think about. It's also going to feature a lot of case study, examples, lesson learned from CDFI practitioners. So a lot of like on the ground, what does this actually look like? As a reminder, you can access and download OFN toolkits for free via CDFI Connect. Once you log in to CDFI Connect and navigate to the resources drop-down menu and select OFN resources. If you don't have a CDFI Connect account, you can join for free at the link being shared in the chat. A list of toolkits and other resources currently available, such as that CDFI 101 toolkit and the 4 pillars framework, can be found in the one-pager on the attendee hub. Links to a few of the toolkits are being shared via chat as well. So check those out. So with that, I think we can stop showing this slide and start asking questions to all of our fellow panelists. So to kick things off, I wanted to give y'all a chance to introduce yourselves by having each of you respond to my first question, which is, why do you think strategic planning is important, and how often do you think you should engage in strategic planning? So Russ, I will let you get started.
Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, so Sequoia Fund is a small native CDFI in the western end of North Carolina. And for a long time, we thought we had a strategic plan, but it was more of a working plan. We would do this annually. We would set a course for the year, and we would work on things. We would have our little check boxes, but we now do a strategic plan every 3 years. We do employ fund consulting to help us with that. I think it's great to have an objective set of eyes on that. So we do it every 3 years, but we also check in with our team, and when I say team, I mean the staff, the board, and with fund consulting. We do that periodically just to make sure that we're on course, that we don't require any mid-course corrections, or if we do, how do we make those? So yeah, we believe that this is a very thorough and detailed process that we probably couldn't afford the time and the resources to do it once a year, but we can certainly do it every 3 years, and then we update it along the way.
Well, perfect. Thanks, Russ. Katie, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm Katie Davenport. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at CommunityWorks. We are a statewide CDFI located in South Carolina and serving the whole state of South Carolina. And for us, like Russ, we strongly believe in a strategic plan every 3 years, sometimes 5 if we think we haven't finished the current one. And for us, it's really been a great way to serve as a lens and a vetting process for initiatives that are brought to us, and really making sure that we are aligning our strategy with our mission and our vision. And, I'm sure everybody in the audience knows that CDFIs get brought a lot of opportunities, and being able to vet them as it relates to all of those criteria in the strategic plan and our mission and vision is really critical, so we don't overcommit and we also don't undercommit either. So I'm happy to be here and excited for this conversation.
Awesome. And last but not least, our non-Carolinas person, Yankee.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Yankee Shering. I'm the Executive Director of Company Capital. We are a CDFI based in New York City that specializes in working. Initially, we were established to work with refugees. We expanded working with immigrants, women, and in the borough of Queens and Staten Island, we work with everyone who's eligible to get a loan or other services. We have a savings match program, IDA program, and our loans range from $1,000. It used to be $500, but we had to, increase it. $1,000 is the minimum to $350,000. And regarding the question, Maggie, so based on the experience of a company capital, if there is one fee or one consultant we're going to spend our money on, it's a strategic planning consultant. We are very lucky here in New York. We have access to people with different kinds of expertise. So in addition to, we have a small staff, 17 full-time and some part-time, but we also work with 7 consultants. But if I was told, given the budget, you can only work with one consultant, I would select the strategic planning consultant, because I think it's so critical. You really need this, objective person to come in and help you. What I think is like a map, which helps you get to where you want to go to. I remember the first time we went through a strategic planning process, I asked the consultant, well, why do you think we need this? Why is strategic planning important? And this is when we only had 5 employees. And she said, Yankee, it's like going to a supermarket. If you go in there with a list of what you need to buy, you're more likely to come out with what you need to buy. If you go in without that list, you're going to end up buying things you don't need. So generally, all our plans have been 3-year plans, strategic plan every 3 years, but with an operational plan once a year. And we really value the time, the operational planning, because that's done with the staff and the consultant, where we set the goals for that particular year. But during the pandemic, given the environment was so different, we did a much shorter scenario plan. Instead of a strategic plan, we had a scenario plan, and the goals were based on if there were going to be, higher waves of infection or lower waves, or also there was a lot of turmoil in Washington, as we all know. Also, who was going to be in the administration and what the funding would look like.
Okay, so lots to dig in here with going off of something that you just said, Yanki. There's a lot of different types of strategic plans out there, a lot of different ways you can plan. So I wanted to throw it out there to the group. And I know, like, Katie, your organization has done a lot of different types of strategic plans. So maybe you can start off. What are the different types of strategic planning processes, plans that you've used, and how have you decided what type of plan you needed at any given point in time for your organization?
Yeah, so like Yanki, our organization is a full 18 strong right now, and we certainly didn't start off that way. So I would say some of our early day strategic plans were more of a operational strategic plan to really plan to plan. I would say when we were preparing for this, we talked about planning to plan. And I think for us in those early days, we knew we didn't have all the stuff that we needed to be a well-oiled and operating CDFI. And we knew that it was going to take a lot of planning. Like, we needed a capitalization plan, we needed some marketing studies. And so for us in the early days, it was using local expertise to help us facilitate those conversations, and then relying on CDFI best practices and the research to help us infuse our local strength and capacity with that industry knowledge. And then I would say as we've matured and grown up over time, we've really been able to have all that infrastructure in place. And so now we really have the luxury of, still maintaining some of that operational excellence and strategy, but really looking for more innovative strategies moving forward. So we're able to think more broadly and boldly in our strategic plan, because we took the time in our early years to really be strategic in our planning as it related to making sure we had that solid foundation of which to kind of springboard all of our future strategy off of. And I would just echo what Yanki also discussed, which was that scenario planning. I think coming out of the height of the pandemic, really understanding what different scenarios could lead our organization down different paths, I think was really helpful for our team to think through, like, what would we do if there was another infection? What would we do if interest rates rose even higher than they are today? Like, what would we do internally and externally? And I think that has been the shift for us, is really still being strategic, but looking at it through a lens of how do we plan for scenarios and game those out to be successful in the future.
Anyone else want to add anything onto that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, it's a small organization. I still consider us small today. Even though there are 10 of us, there were only 3 of us for a long time. And our primary service area is, of course, and our target market is the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in Western North Carolina. We serve a 7-county service area, which when you look at a map, it's fairly small. When you start to drive it, it's not. But right here in Cherokee, we were built, as all CDFIs are. We're not the lender of first choice. We're the lender of last resort. But over time, we've developed a reputation that we are now the first place people want to go. We have a brand recognition. So this is where people come for loans. This is where people come for technical assistance. But this is also where the tribe comes when they need to push an initiative that has something to do with economic development. And we've, in a lot of cases, become that de facto economic development arm of the tribe, because we do what we do very well, and we've built that trust. But something that Katie said earlier, when you start getting asked to do a lot of those things, you have to decide, are they within the lines of your playing field? Are they those things that can further your organization along your mission and vision? And one of the things that came out of our most recent strategic plan was that we were just saying yes to too many things. And we wanted to be that organization that everybody trusted to get things done, but it was stretching us very thin. So we went from looking at our plan as something that tells us what to do to looking at our plan to put the guardrails on the highway so that we didn't go too far afield, that we stayed within our mission, within our vision, so that when we look at what people are asking us to do, what other organizations, what local governments are asking us to do, we can say, wait a minute, that doesn't really fit. We don't have the resources for that. And we're big enough now to say, we can't handle that. For a long time, we said yes because we believed that we should. And now we can look at some of those initiatives and back off away from those because they're just not a good fit for us. So the lens through which we look at our strategic plan has definitely shifted over the years.
Janki, I have a question for you. So building off of what Russ just said, I know some organizations review their mission and vision statement during strategic planning. Others don't. So in your mind, how often has a company capital evaluated your mission and vision? Do you think this should be part of the planning process? Have you separate? What's your thoughts?
So obviously during the scenario planning sessions, we kept it very simple, because there was a lot going on. But during the regular each 3 year, when we go through the strategic planning, we do look at the mission. And, just to prepare myself for the session, I was reflecting on, the mission. I was looking at some of the questions that, Maggie, you were likely to ask. And there's been a slight shift, not so much difference in mission, but I think in the language, because I remember about 7 or 8 years ago when we were going through, this was 3 strategic plannings ago, we had self-sufficiency. We said, a company capital, to look at, it says, creates a pathway to self-sufficiency. And I really felt it shouldn't be self-sufficiency. We want more than self-sufficiency for ourselves. So just like us, our clients want prosperity. So, and I couldn't think of the word prosperity. And I said wealth creation. So 1 or 2 of the board members disagreed. So it's only recently, maybe a year and a half ago, we were able to, get that language in. And our communications person, she's excellent. And she said, what about prosperity? And everybody agreed. So I think even though the mission, we're not making a dramatic change to the mission in terms of focus, but I think in terms of language, and then just having that difference, self-sufficiency to prosperity, and the whole statement focused more on the clients rather than what a company capital was doing. I don't know if that makes sense, Russ or Kay, but when I look at the language we use, there's been this gradual shift from, it's not so much about a company capital, it's more about our clients. It's more about what they need and the fact we're supporting them. They're the sort of engines of business development and growth, where they're providing the resources. So I think it is helpful, every 3 years, if you're, going through the strategic planning process, to sort of refresh the mission and, take a look at the language.
Russ or Katie, anything else that y'all want to add in there, thinking of the role that mission and vision plays in strategic planning?
I would just add that we did change our mission and vision with the last strategic plan, and the conversation in the previous one was that we needed to address it, but we just weren't in a place where we could reassess it. And I think it's okay to say, I recognize that we need to maybe make a shift. We just aren't in the place to make that change. And so this last year, we were ready to make the change, and we knew that we needed a new mission and vision statement that reflected the language, like Janki said, that we use now, and that aligned with really how we envision community for us moving forward. And I think, our board is, visionary in that way, and we have, a committee. So I would say too, it's part of that strategic planning process, gathering more committees, but we created a subcommittee to solely look at the vision and mission statement. And I think what we came up with was really powerful, and then really lent itself to all of the pillars of our plan moving forward.
I think there are 2 dangers in a strategic plan. One is going to the time and energy and expense of writing one and then never following it. The other is that you follow it so closely, you don't have the freedom to move and shift where you really need to. And I think that includes re-examining the mission statement, the vision statement. You know, when your organization starts to mature, are you really going to be tied to those things that got you through the first few years? Maybe your community needs different things from you. Maybe your organization is poised to do different things now. So we should not be afraid to re-examine that. And I applaud Community Works for re-examining that. That's something that we look at all the time. And while we may decide that for now we're going to stick with our current mission statement, doesn't mean that it's not on the table every year when we have board retreats and we start to really tear apart our strategic plan and dig into it. That's definitely one of the things that comes up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and I'm sure Russ and Katie have that, but what I love about the strategic planning process is at the end, the consultant we work with, Adina Abramowicz, she creates a dashboard. It's very simple, but we have all the deliverables, so at each board meeting, we just need to fill that in to show the board members where we are and what we fulfilled in terms of deliverables. And it's kind of a strange thing, but having those goals almost frees us. We know then, and all the staff know, well, these are the goals, and each team is responsible for making sure we get there, or if we don't, we have an explanation. And that almost seems to help us with our work-life balance. So then we know when to say no and when to say yes if there are some extra projects. Because I know CDFIs are infamous for taking on more and more work. During the pandemic, we learned that wasn't, always the best thing for our staff.
Building off of that, what we found among our clients was during the pandemic, a lot of folks were afraid their strategic plan that they made pre-pandemic wasn't going to be relevant. We found that organizations that had solid strategic plans, the goals didn't change, the really big strategies didn't change. It was those objectives and tactics, or maybe the timeline of when you thought you were in a company or accomplish different parts of your strategic plan might have changed. So we've kind of started talking about this a little bit, but I'd love to hear from y'all. Russ, maybe you can kick this off. How frequently do you review your strategic plan, and how do you make sure that it's still relevant over the course of 3 years, especially looking back over the last 3 years? How did you make sure your last strategic plan was still relevant?
Well, I think confession is good for the soul, Maggie. And I'm just going to confess that during COVID, we threw everything out and we just kind of hung onto the wheel and tried to keep it in the road. And I think a lot of CDFIs were in that same situation. But, when we came out of it and we started looking, because our strategic plan was set to renew in 2021, and we wanted to go through a whole new process. And I think that's when fund consulting had sort of changed the process by which you do strategic planning for organizations, which we found to be very, very helpful and beneficial. We realized that we weren't that far off track. Again, some of those tactics had changed. The way we were doing things was different. I do like that Yankee brought up the work-life balance, because that became a big issue. We started to look more internally than we had. In previous plans, we had always focused externally. We'd always looked at our market. How do we serve the world better? And it made us start to think about, how are we going to take this plan and turn it inward to make sure that we have not only the capacity to achieve it, but I'm a firm believer that happy people don't leave happy places. And if we're going to keep everybody happy and keep everybody here and doing what we do best, then we've got to share that. And admittedly, again, more confession, I was the one who was going through the strategic plan, and often I didn't share it adequately with everybody else. So now we try to make a point to do this not only in staff meetings, but we're trying to bring our board more into the process so that they don't feel like they only have that once a year board retreat, one and done. We've looked at the strategic plan. Now we're hands off the rest of the year. It has to be a continuous process. you can't have what I call a filing cabinet business plan or filing cabinet strategic plan where, okay, we've spent the money, we've written the check, we've got the document. Let's throw it in a filing cabinet. We don't have to look at this again for another 3 years. That doesn't help. It's like Yankee was saying earlier, and it's like taking the map and you just kind of throw it in the glove box and don't follow it at all. So yeah, we have tried to do a better job of looking at this periodically. I won't say that there is a set time once a month or once a quarter that we do it, but certainly we all now have examined it enough that when we get the sense that maybe we've taken a wrong turn or maybe there's a shortcut ahead that we could take, we pull that plan out and we look at it. And we're not afraid to re-examine some of the things that when we wrote the plan, we thought these were going to be big, big deals. We thought this is going to take up a lot of our time. Turns out maybe it didn't. Maybe the need for what we were planning to do has evaporated. That happened a lot during COVID. We thought we were going to be helping more with some more COVID assistance that continued after the pandemic. And at least in our area, a lot of that assistance wasn't requested. We would put it out into the world and people just didn't ask for it anymore. They didn't want it. And they wanted to move on, I think. It's kind of a long way around the barn to say that we try to do it periodically, but I wouldn't say that we have a regular schedule for doing that.
Katie, do you have anything else to add in here?
Yeah, I would say that our operating plan has exactly where those different pieces fall within the strategic plan. So I think like both Russ and Yankee mentioned, like we want to make sure our staff knows that we're not asking them to do like something crazy out of left field, that we have thought really carefully about it. It was part of the strategic plan that, we had done thoughtfully with their help and their support. And that when we draw up goals in our operating plan, that they can clearly see, yeah, I'm working hardcore on pillar 2 and my strategies are this, and this is what like my goal and my mission and vision for my particular job is. And I think that's really helped everybody to see, like from operations and finance all the way to the people doing our mission delivery work, that they can see that they are part of the overall strategy. They feel part of the overall mission and vision because, it takes someone to cut a check or send an ACH or a wire, to help those businesses just as much as it does to underwrite those loans. And I think for us, the strategic plan really brings all of our team together in a way that some things just don't do. And for us, I think that has helped us grow and get everybody bought into this mission and vision and the work and the movement of the CDFI world.
I feel like I've heard this from all of y'all in some way or another, that it sounds like your planning process was pretty inclusive and included a lot of different folks from your organization. So I know like we've been talking about why things are important, but it would be awesome to give people examples of how we actually went about doing some things. So I wanted to throw it out there. Maybe Russ, you can get started because I know we did this in the last time we went through strategic planning with y'all. How did you go about making sure that the planning process was inclusive, that you were bringing in different voices and viewpoints as we were going through planning?
So one of the things that Fund Consulting asked of us as we launched into the planning process was that they wanted a list of stakeholders. And I think it would have been very easy for me to send them a list of people who would only say nice things about us and give us glowing reviews and, oh, there's nothing else that needs to be done. But I think you have to have the guts to put your planning team in touch with people who are going to give you the brutal truth about what's going on and tell you things that you don't want to hear and be honest with you. And, when you have clients, when you have community members, when you have political leaders who say things like, we really love what they're doing, but, okay, it's everything that comes after the but that we now have to pay attention to and we have to work on, because all the nice stuff that came before the but, we were kind of hoping they would say that anyway, all right? So we wanted to be very careful, and I think it really came down to, yes, you guys interviewed them, you had an objective interview with those people, and it really started with us being able to come up with a list of stakeholders who we thought might have more to say than just nice things. I've always said, if you want to know how to improve your business, ask your best customers. They'll give you the brutal, honest truth. And that's what we strove for. That's what we wanted. And in fact, we told people, look, when you get this call, give them the good, the bad, and the ugly. Tell them everything, warts and all. We're not afraid of this. We need to know. And we're not going to know how to improve if you're not honest with them.
Katie and Yankee, what are other techniques that y'all used to make sure you were, being inclusive, bringing in a bunch of voices?
So, since Russ touched on competitors and peers and people who are more likely to, come back with feedback that's going to help you grow, I think that's important. But what's, also very important for us was for each and every member of the team to feel that they were heard, and also to feel that, as Katie mentioned, this very critical role each one of them has, even if it's, preparing the checks or checking the closing documents or doing the outreach. So the dashboard we have actually breaks down, and again, going back to your earlier question, Maggie, for us, it's always been the strategic plan has been a sort of living, breathing document because of it leads to the operational planning. And I think, Katie, you mentioned about how, that was sort of one of the fun things everybody did as a team. So everybody has a role to play, whether it's if it's the outreach person, increasing partnerships, obviously the lending team, the chief lending officer is responsible for making sure we make, zillions of loans, et cetera. So, making sure that each member feels they're a very important part of this puzzle, which has created this map, just contributes to making the operational planning and implementation much more successful. Also, they all feel more invested, and it's much more inclusive. As inclusive as possible.
And I would just add that one thing that we did that's maybe a little bit different, and we actually did an anonymous assessment tool. So everybody could submit how they viewed the organization on our team in a way that gave us some really great aggregate data to help inform some of our operational things and some of our more aspirational items. And I think that was helpful because they could feel like they could be very brutally honest with how we were doing, and in a way that they didn't feel like their manager was going to come find them and be like, why don't you think we have better internal communication? So I think giving them the opportunity to be really transparent with how they feel at all levels is really important, because you have to have a lot of buy-in on these strategic plans from your team.
So we've talked a lot about the consultants that y'all work with and everything like that, but at the end of the day, not every CDFI is at that stage where you can hire a consultant to help you with strategic planning. So I'd love to hear from y'all have you gone through strategic planning without a consultant? And what suggestions or advice do you have for CDFIs that just might not be at that point or might not have the resources available right now to hire a consultant or an external party to facilitate strategic planning? Katie, I know that y'all have been through it before, so I'll let you start off.
Yeah, so in the early years, we did not have the budget to pay quite a bit of money for a national CDFI expert strategic planner. We relied on the expertise of a local facilitator who was very familiar with the nonprofit sector and the landscape in South Carolina, and was really great at facilitating conversations. And then we were able to use, I think at the time, OFN had put out some papers on financial management and some other great tools. So hopefully this new toolkit will be perfect for those smaller CDFIs. And being able to use what's existing on the CDFI industry out in the world, and then having a really great facilitator, because it's always true. If you have somebody facilitating your board, it always loves that. And the staff have the opportunity to speak more freely too. And I think even if you can't afford the consultant, I do think having a third party help facilitate the conversations, is really always helpful in these times.
I think you need an objective voice in the room. You need somebody who, as we say in our neck of the woods, doesn't have a dog in the fight, and they can make recommendations. They can create a safe space for people to speak their mind, but they can also, again, keep people in bounds and moving in the same direction. I think we've all had these budget issues where we think, I just can't afford anybody to do that. But a lot of communities overlook the fact that we have some resources that we're already paying for with our tax dollars. You've got an SBDC somewhere close by. You might have a community college. You might have a university nearby that can lend somebody to come in and help facilitate that. A lot of times those colleges and universities have local outreach programs where their professors who do this for a living get some sort of recognition, or it's part of their job that they do so many hours of community outreach or service every year. So don't think that you have to hire someone, at least in the early going. Yes, ultimately it does help to have somebody who knows our industry, but you need an objective voice in the room, an objective set of eyes on what you're doing, and somebody to help you congeal everything that you talk about. I mean, just having 50 flip chart pages full of notes handed to you doesn't really help you do anything. It doesn't help you get anywhere. So again, look for those resources that are out there that you may already be paying for, but you're never thinking about.
Bianchi, do you have anything else to add on top of there?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, but I agree. You have to have an objective third party and someone who's trained to facilitate, or someone. And I think, as an example, we are not large enough to have a whole HR department, but through Reserve, which is a organization of retired professionals, we were able to get a retired HR executive who helps us on a part-time basis. So there are lots of really accomplished experts out there, and resources that you could tap into, because I think to try and do this on your own, I wouldn't recommend it, because there's already a certain dynamic set in certain organizations, or set in all organizations, no matter how inclusive you are. So you do need to have that objective third party come in and facilitate the discussion and conversations.
Thank you. So I think the elephant in the room, I feel like right now with the CDFI industry, is certification, and the certification application that one day will be released, the new version. So one of the there's a lot of changes going through, lifting geographic restrictions on target markets, requiring that CDFIs have a strategic plan to show that they comply with the mission criteria. They don't just have a mission on paper, but they're incorporating that mission into strategic decisions of their organizations. So I was curious, are y'all thinking about how the CDFI requirements will impact your organization, and how does that come into either your current strategic plans or future strategic plans?
But I'm not familiar, Maggie, with all the requirements, under this new, all the new requirements under the CDFI certification. But what I will say is, I think it's pretty reasonable, depending on what they're requiring in the strategic plan, to require that if you're applying for an award, cash award, that you have a strategic plan. I think I think it's pretty reasonable. I mean, for instance, a company capital, it's not a requirement for us to be ARIS rated, but we went through the process because we learned a lot through the process, and it really helped us set up sound systems in place, even though there is a cost to going through the process to get the rating.
I think we're a small native CDFI, but we have a budget. We're now financially healthy enough. It's really not going to hurt us to comply with any of these new rules. However, I know that there are a lot of smaller rural and native CDFIs. They're going to feel the pinch because they're already short-staffed. They're doing a lot of work, and a good strategic plan takes some time and energy, not just money. So I think they're going to feel the pinch. I would just implore all of us as CDFIs to recognize that there might be a small CDFI on the other side of town or nearby that is going to significantly be affected by these rule changes. Let's lend a hand. If I can go and facilitate for somebody else, again, knowing what I know about facilitation, just to help get them through until they can grow to the point where they can then have a budget and bring in professionals, more power to them. But we've got to be willing to lend a hand to some of these smaller resource-strapped organizations. I think they will feel it.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, OFN, that's why we have an organization like OFN, and they're coming out with these toolkits. And my thinking is, even if you're a very small CDFI, even if you can't invest thousands of dollars into a strategic plan, you're going to have like a checklist or some sort of plan that should comply with what, the CDFI fund is requesting.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that any nonprofit organization seeking grant funding is going to be required to submit a strategic plan, if it's from a foundation or from a government agency or wherever. So I don't think it's unreasonable to request a strategic plan. I think what scares a lot of people is the vague language that we don't know exactly what that requirement for seeing that annual strategy. Do we have to go through that entire process every year? Are they going to be willing to take an updated plan? And I think as they start to shore up some of that language, it'll become clearer, and maybe we don't have to stay in this state of panic as much, and and we can move on and do what we do best.
We don't panic. We survived the pandemic.
That's right. We get it done. We get it done.
We survived the PPP loans. We're going to be fine.
Katie, anything else to add on top of those, great words?
I think I hear Russ, and I'm glad that there hopefully resources for the smaller rural CDFIs. I think it's also important for CDFIs of all size to really think about how they have their mission and vision set up and how they use strategic planning to serve all of our targeted communities. And I think I applaud the CDFI fund for making this commitment to helping CDFIs across the board really be intentional. I think it's more than just a plan. They have to have processes and purpose behind their strategic plan. And I would never want to harm a smaller CDFI because those requirements are too onerous. But I do think making sure that CDFIs are doing what they need to be doing is something that I think a lot of us can agree is a step in the right direction. So hopefully clarity is kindness, as our CEO says, and hopefully the CDFI fund will be kind to all of us.
I don't think there are better words. And I do want to say, thank you all for bringing up that, there are resources out there, including this upcoming toolkit from OFN. So with that, we'll end this portion of this session. I want to first say thank you to all of the panelists. Your insight, everything you said, I found really enjoyable and had a lot of great takeaways. So I hope everyone else who joined us did as well. I also want to say thank you to everyone who joined the session today. If you're watching this live, I really hope that you'll be able to join us in this next portion of the session, the interactive Zoom room for Q&A, so you can, jump into our conversation. You can access the Zoom room by clicking the Join the Interactive Discussion link, which is at the bottom of this page below the session description. Give us a minute or two as we switch over to the interactive Zoom room. And if you decide not to join the discussion room, we really hope to see all of you back at the closing plenary today at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. So with that, I will see y'all in the next Zoom room.
Thank you, Maggie.